Okay, so the message says, to people to be free if politicians say to media that this is an attack by the Islamic State.
Saying if the police go away, right now he's not going to shoot the lady in front of me. There's a policeman at the window who has not moved. Can you please tell
Yeah,
him?
okay, I am, okay.
Let's be realistic. There was times during that siege, and it was 16 hours, you thought you were going to die.
We survived. It's quite miraculous, really. That's the truth of it.
Yeah. When did you realise something terrible was about to take place?
And it wasn't until he pulled out the gun that I thought, oh no, this is real and we're going to die. He was speaking very deliberately, telling us that we were hostages and that he was wanting to speak to the Prime Minister on national radio and that Australia was under attack.
What was going through your mind?
I just went, we're dead, because that's what terrorists do.
He's declared it's a terrorist act. He's got the women around him, as you would see, like literally a human shield, putting the men around the outer perimeter in a circle, getting the flag and the signs up against the window.
As an aside, one of the other girls referred to him as a terrorist, and he said, well, he got a little bit indignant. Do you think I'm a terrorist? And she said, well, what else can I call you? And at that point he said, you can call me brother ISIS. We're all on our feet. Like, it's kind of screaming, etc. And of course, he grabbed me because I just happened to be the first person in his eye of sight. So he grabbed me, he's got me by the back of my dress, and he's got the gun. And I'm thinking, great, the police are going to come, they're going to try and shoot him and they'll shoot me and I'm definitely going to die. For me in particular, my concern about my mother was that I knew that she would not be taking this kind of crap, quite frankly.
Don't say that, Mum. Don't be ridiculous, young man.
Actually, yeah, it was a situation like that. I'm going to go and spit in his face and all of you fellas are going to run out. But Robyn, he could kill you. And she goes, that's okay, I've had a good life, I'm not worried, he kills me, doesn't matter, you fellas get out, you're only young, blah, blah, blah. And then he says to her, but he could kill somebody else.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers.
Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. If I mention the date, the 15th of December 2014, you probably can't remember what you were doing. But if I mentioned the Lindt Cafe Siege, I'm sure you'd know exactly where you were on that day. Like most people in Australia, that siege is embedded in our psyche. It was the day terrorism came to the Sydney CBD. 18 innocent people were taken hostage by Man Monis. The siege lasted 16 hours. 2 hostages, Tori Johnson and Katrina Dawson, lost their lives, and Man Monis was shot and killed by police in order to resolve the siege after Tori was shot. Today's guest, Louisa Hope, was one of the hostages who was used as a human shield throughout the siege, and she suffered gunshot wounds from bullet fragments. Louisa is going to take us right inside the siege and talk about the ongoing effects being caught up in such a horrific act of terrorism has had on her. I think you'll find, like I have, what an impressive, kind person Louisa is. She has a really interesting outlook on life, having been caught up in a situation like the Lindt Cafe Siege. Welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thank you, Gary. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, we first met a couple of months ago.
That's right.
We're at a book launch / retirement function for Dave Gore, retired detective inspector, a counter-terrorism expert. And when I saw you, your face looked familiar, and we were talking in the same group of people, and then you mentioned your name, and then I knew exactly who you were because, as coincidence would have it, just a couple of days before I was speaking to Pamela Young, retired detective inspector that knows you, and your name came up, and there we were at this function, and now we're here in I Catch Killers.
Yes, it's amazing. I was saying earlier, actually, that I feel like I have more cop friends now than I have my normal friends because I just seem to be coming up to events and different things that cops, ex-cops and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's an interesting crew.
Well, they're two of the good guys with
Yes.
Dave and Pamela, so
That's
you're picking your friends in the cop world wisely. Look, it was almost 10 years now since the Lindt Cafe. What's your reflections on it from the person you were before that time and the person you are now?
Yeah, the 10-year anniversary is a moment, like it's a moment in time to reflect, and certainly with all the things and everything that's happened since then, it certainly has come to that point where I am there now thinking about the whole thing. And I think that previously, before the siege, because the truth is life is, before the siege and after the siege.
Yeah,
that's
makes
how
sense.
My friends and my family measure it, as I do too. So the before the siege, really, I was just living my life in my own little bubble, as we all tend to do. It's all about we are the centre of our own world, and so I was just doing all the fun things. I'd not long got divorced, and I was single again, and I was. Unfortunately, I had to medically retire because of MS, and so that was a totally different world too. So I was travelling and having fun, really.
It's funny, isn't it? You don't know what's around the corner in life, and your life changed so much from that day. The person you are, I would imagine, is a different person from what it was the day you walked into the cafe. I said before we started the podcast, and I want to say it again. I apologise for bringing it up and having you talk about that, because I can understand a traumatic situation like that. When you sit down and talk in depth like we're going to today, you relive the moment.
It is true, but the thing is, because I have always felt that this event, the siege, it happened to not only to myself and the other people in the cafe, but it really happened to our whole country. So after the siege, I definitely had that sense of duty and willingness to share with whoever asked me to come and speak, because we all have questions. It's fascinating to me what people reflect on, when you're out there and you're speaking and sharing, what they have to say about it and what they think. Some of their information is not correct, and sometimes they have an understanding that is, a blessing to me too. Yeah.
Okay, well, I understand where you're coming from, and I think situations like that, it needs to be spoken about. It shouldn't be swept under the carpet, and we need people to understand what the ramifications are when actions are taken in the way they were at that siege.
That's right, because it wasn't just a tragedy, with two innocent people being killed. It was a shock. And the fact of the matter is, we had the inquest afterwards, and there's always a question whether the inquest was sufficient, or if perhaps it was maybe a blunt instrument to consider the whole aspect of the event, because inquests, of course, just focus on the people who have died in a particular situation. So, yes, there was a lot that the inquest just couldn't cover by the very nature of its function. So, when we think about that, the fullness of the experience that we all had collectively, there are things that are still not resolved, to my mind, things that are still not understood. We have not learnt the full gauntlet of lessons that we could from that event. And I think that really learning the lessons across the board is the least that we can do to honour the people who passed, and also benefit our broader society as we come together. Because, what's the use of any experience in life if you don't learn from it?
Don't learn from it. And I think if we can be open enough to, and when I say we, police, like I was involved in aspects of it. I led the investigation in the crime scene, as you know, so I was called out for that. It was an unusual situation for our law enforcement officers, for the New South Wales Police, for the country, for Australia as a whole. And you're quite right. Like, okay, if things could have been done better, and it's benefit of hindsight's a wonderful thing. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be a direct criticism. It's just what lessons did we learn
right.
from that.
Yeah.
And look, speaking to you, I think it's amazing. Like, I think the insight that you have to what you went through, and you can look at it and reflect on it, I think is quite amazing. And I'm sure it'll come out today when we're talking.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, let's be realistic. There was times during that siege, and it was 16 hours, that you thought you were going to die.
Absolutely. Definitely. There were 3 particular occasions where I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm going to God today, you know.
Yeah.
It was serious.
Yeah.
You know, and that really, and in the end, with the tragedy of Katrina losing her life in that situation at the end, and all of us who were still in the, the main part of the cafe at that time, we were all injured. And, that we survived is quite miraculous, really. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, yeah. I can only, and I suppose it's everyone's worst fear, but it's a fear that you look when you're watching TV and a movie or something that is taken a hostage. And I think when we all get on a plane, you think, okay, wonder what happens if someone got up with a gun, what would go on? And here you were. It would have almost felt surreal, I would imagine.
It absolutely did. It was, actually, Gary, when Man Haron Monis stood up and started to make his little speech, in my head, I thought, it's can to camera, we're across the road from Channel 7. It's just a lark.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he pulled out the gun that I thought, oh, no, this is real and we're going to die, because that's what terrorists do, right? They kill you. And so that was a surprise not to be killed on the spot, really.
Yeah, I can only, well, I can't imagine, unless you've been there, who knows how you react or how you would feel from that. Let's talk about you, person you were, pre-siege. So before the day, describe your life.
Well, I had a very happy life, really,
Yeah.
and I live a very spiritual life, faith is really important to me. And so I had my church community, and I had my group of friends, and I lived in Urco, and, not far down the road, I'd moved into a new place in Enmore in Sydney. And that was a really happy time for me, actually.
Yeah.
It was all about going out and having fun.
Yeah. How old were you at the time?
Now, that's a good question. I think I was 52.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a great time in a woman's life to be 50.
Okay, and living in Erskineville.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun times had by all. So yourself and your mother, Robyn,
That's right.
went to the cafe. What was that about? A catch up, or were you meeting people?
Well, actually, I had in that week.
Yeah.
I was in Texas. I was in Austin, Texas, and I'd been helping Mum with some legal stuff, and she rang me and said, "Oh, you need to come home early because, we need to get it sorted out." Okay, so I come home early, so close to Christmas, we're all just focused there. So anyway, we had an appointment with a family lawyer, so no big deal, it's ordinary business. And there we were. And we had, because we didn't want to be late, because Mum lived out near the Blue Mountains at the time, and because she didn't want to be late, we made the decision that we would go in on the Sunday, on the Sunday night, and that we would then not get caught up in the traffic, Monday morning. And that's what we did. We were at the Hilton, and we had that moment, actually, Gary, where we're just sort of deciding where we would have breakfast, because our appointment, I think, was maybe at 10. And we were like, will we stay at the Hilton or will we go up to the Lindt? And because, that's where his office was, in the tower block behind the Lindt. And so will we, won't we? Don't want a big breakfast. We'll just go up and have coffee and toast. So that's what we did. We just jumped in the cab and we just slid through that door and into the Lindt, And you just, things that you don't even bother about, Which cafe will I go to? Where will I have breakfast? No big deal. Ordinary,
Just wandered. So just that typical morning that we've all been through. A cafe, not big breakfast, so let's go grab a coffee, and you've gone in there. So you're sitting down. What was your impression when you walked into the cafe? Had you been there before?
Yes. I used to work in the city, and Lindt was, a regular place. And, yeah, it was no big deal kind of thing. You know, the one thing we did notice was young Jared Morton Hoffman. He was our server that day morning, and he looked a little bit not wanting to be there. And, you know, like, oh.
Yeah.
And I said to my mum something like, that kid doesn't look very happy. And she said, oh, well, you know, had to get up early. And, and I said, oh, he's going to be in for a long day then. Not imagining, of course, but, you know, just sort of ordinary observations. But, so that was, you know, me, like, just not interested really in what was going on.
Again, just that typical day, and the young people working. Why am I up at this ridiculous hour of the morning? So, was there anything else about the environment that seemed unusual to you?
It was just that pre-Christmas thing. But I have to tell you that my mother, Robyn. So, yeah, Mum's a very interesting woman, and classic salt of the earth kind of thing, and do anything for anyone, that kind of person. And always going over and beyond. But this particular day, we're sitting there, and as it was, she was sitting on the bench seat at the Lindt. If anyone's been there, there's a bench seat that runs along the Martin Place side. And I was sitting facing her with my back to the main body of the cafe. So Mum's sitting there, and we've got our coffee, waiting for toast, and she says, what's that man doing over there? And I'm like, what man, Mum? Chat, you know, random. Carrying on, she said, why is that man sitting there? That must be the manager, she says. And I'm like, Mum, what are you? She says, well, he just doesn't look right. So I kind of like did the big turn around to see what she was talking about. She said, don't look now, you know, that kind of thing. And so I'm like, well, Mum, don't worry about it. Just leave him to his breakfast, you know. Yeah. No big deal. Anyway, but she kept rabbiting on about this chap that she just didn't feel was in the right place. And she's commenting about him, you know, on and off through our breakfast. In the end, I'm like, Mum, just relax. Don't worry about that man. Yeah. Anyway, you know, it's sort of, since then has reminded me, of course, that one should always listen to what one's mother says.
Is it well, what would they know?
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't it interesting, instinct, and something just didn't feel right. And I think it can come down to almost like an energy, someone putting out the wrong energy. But
that's right.
It's interesting that your mum picked up on that.
Yeah, well, she certainly did. That was her intuition, you know, and how often do we dismiss our intuition? I mean, of course, wouldn't have prompted us to get up and run out of the cafe or anything, but just that she was aware, and just that I was dismissive, you know. Yeah. But, so he was obviously at that very early stage talking to Tori Johnson, as I understand now, and got him to make a phone call to 000, that kind of thing.
Okay. How it played out, as I understand, was that Man Monis sat down at a table on his own, spoke to one of the staff and said, who's your manager? And the manager, Tori, came out and sat down and was having the conversation with him. And that's when Man Monis told him, this is what's happening. When did you realise something terrible was about to take place?
Well, we're sitting there and we had made that decision not to go upstairs, that we'd have another coffee. You know, another sliding door moment, but we...
Damn that extra coffee.
I know, right? But then there was a little buzz around the cafe that went, oh, the doors are locked. And I thought, oh, that's ridiculous, you know. Well, and I'm just, they'll call the building manager and they'll sort it out, no big deal. But in the meantime, I'll just go and pay for our coffee. So I got up and went to pay for our breakfast. And once again, where the counter was, the till, I was facing out, looking out onto the corner of Phillip Street and George Street, Martin Place rather, through the door. And, the little girl who was serving me was just, she's had a mouth open and I couldn't see what she could see. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with this kid, you know? But, of course, she could see him standing up and making his speech. And so we did the exchange with the money. I turned around to go back to my seat, and there he was. And it was only then that I realised that something was amiss. And as I said to you earlier, you know, it wasn't until he pulled out his gun that I actually thought it was real.
Mm. What was the first? He's standing up. Was he talking or shouting? What was being said?
No, he was talking very deliberately, speaking very deliberately, and not shouting, just certainly not quiet, but just in a normal voice, telling us that we were hostages and that he was wanting to speak to the Prime Minister on national radio, and that Australia was under attack. And at the same time, he was putting on his bandana that he had around his head, and then he pulled out his gun. And then it was like, that's real. The gun was real.
Okay. So I think in the conversation he had with Tori, he got the staff to lock the doors, and then you've paid for your coffee, and then he's standing up, and then he's put the bandana on and pulled out the gun. I got, what was going through your mind?
Well, in the moment, once I realised that it just wasn't some sort of candid camera joke, I just went, we're dead, because that's what terrorists do. They don't mess around, and I thought, we're all going to die. Quite literally, that was my thought. And it was that kind of moment of, okay, this is it. This is my dying day, really. That's how I was thinking.
Yeah, well, it's understandable, because if you've caught up in a bank robbery, the objective there is not to kill hostages or get attention. But when you're caught up in a situation that's been declared a terrorist, it's a reasonable assumption to think this is not going to end nicely.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then, of course, he started to place everybody around the room and pulled the women in close to him and the men out on the outer ring, and putting people up at the windows with his sign and things like that, his little flag that he had. And so there was all of that going on as well. And of course, in the room, we're all strangers, all of us who are customers, and of course the staff knew each other, but we didn't know each other. So we're just randomly there. And it was like, well, what's next? And so he's giving instruction and all that kind of thing.
So let me just talk through that, because getting the feel of what you went through there. He's declared it's a terrorist act. He's got the women around him, as you would see, like literally a human shield, putting the men around the outer perimeter in a circle, getting the flag and the signs up against the window. What was your concern for yourself? You're there with your mother. What, you had concerns for your mother?
Oh yeah, definitely, because two things. Of course, one is concern for one's mother and everybody else. But for me in particular, my concern about my mother was that I knew that she would not be taking this kind of crap, quite frankly.
Don't say that, Mum. Yeah.
Exactly, because, I knew her, and she would not have liked his behaviour.
Don't be ridiculous, young man.
Actually, yeah, it was a situation like that. But, so my concern was just trying to keep her quiet and still and just, breathe, Mum. But, of course, once he realised that we were related, he separated us.
Right.
So, for example, the way he positioned us, I could not see her. Mum was actually seated behind me on the bench, and I was seated, and he faced me towards him. And, yeah, so...
Did you get a chance to speak to your mum, like to communicate with your mum right at the start?
Just a little bit, but not much, mainly through, just what we're saying with her eyes. But funnily enough, he was on it. Like, he was on all of us about keeping our eyes closed and not, like, giving each other signals or anything like that. And definitely sort of being aware of people can talk apart from words, And so, yes. So there was very little opportunity for that, and only at one point he actually instructed me to speak to my mother. Okay. So, and that was peculiar in itself. But that really was my concern with Mum, just trying to keep her calm.
I could, when I say I could imagine, then I'll probably trip up on that throughout this. I can't imagine. It's just, it's a surreal situation that 99.99% of people never find themselves in. You're sitting there. You got this person. How is his behaviour? Is it erratic, or is it controlled, or deliberate?
He's calm.
Yep.
Very deliberate, in fact. And in lots of ways, it was like he had thought through a lot of things, but there are other things that he hadn't thought about. But then, of course, really, the man had originally planned to go to Channel 7, and because he couldn't get in because of the security, the Lindt was his second kind of choice, if you like.
Yeah.
And so things that he just didn't kind of know, like the layout of the cafe and stuff like that. So some things he was very deliberate about and other things not peculiar.
So you're sitting there, you got your eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
Is he talking, or are you just left there in the moment wondering what the hell's going to happen?
Well, the eyes closed was eyes closed, eyes open routine that went on regularly.
What he would tell you to close your eyes,
close your eyes,
and then you can
open your eyes. It was so strange. But anyway, so that's what we were doing. And of course, it quickly became obvious that what he really wanted was media attention.
Yep.
Right at the beginning, he told me to ring 000. So I assumed in that moment that I was the first person ringing 000.
Yep.
Didn't know about Tori's call, of course. So I was ringing 000, which I did. And then he was happy with the way I had made the call, and then he said something peculiar in that. He said, "That was good, you can be my secretary." I mean, seriously, what a promotion. But anyway, that's the day, right?
Just the fact that you can smile, I'm sorry I'm laughing, because it's not a laughing, but you got to, haven't you? You got to
that's
look
true.
at
You got to
the ridiculous.
Because if you don't, you can go into the hole of the tragedy and into the fear and all that kind of thing. And so, anyway, that moment, and then he told me to get to find ABC Radio on the phone.
Is this your own phone? Your phone
No,
from?
actually, it was Mum's, because that day I had forgotten my phone, which was a bit silly, but anyway, I forgot my phone. So Mum has an Android and I have an Apple and blah, blah, and I've got no idea how to work her phone. So anyway, I'm trying to find the radio, ABC Radio, and I think I found the ABC Book Club, which he was not interested in at all. He wanted ABC, the news station. So very fortunately, this is what happened. Young Jared Morton Hoffman, who was a young boy, who was actually our waiter, our server that day, he quickly stepped in and said, "I'll do it." And with that, I passed the phone to Jared, and Jared really stepped up from there.
Yeah.
Amazing young man. He was only 19 at the time, and just incredible.
Took the initiative and took the pressure off others.
That's right.
Yeah, it's impressive how people react in situations, and this is the kid that you and your mum were saying, look, he doesn't want to be here, and
I know, that's right.
He steps up like that.
I know.
When you phoned 000, what did you say?
I remembered that I had to be very, very clear, because this was not a call that 000 would be used to. So, I said to the woman, "Are you listening? Right, this is what's happening." And I said, my mother and I, this is just from memory.
Yeah.
My mother and I are in the Lindt Cafe, the corner of Phillip Street and Martin Place in Sydney CBD. And I knew I had to say that, because in that, very, very precise about that, because 000 are everywhere.
Yeah.
They're not just, they're not Sydney. They could have been anywhere, and they would not have actually known what the location I was speaking about. So I was trying to be very particular about it. And, the man, because what else do you refer to him as? The man has a gun. And then, of course, 000 go into the panic, like, how many are you? And, where are you? And how many are? So just like, yeah. So at the same time, he's telling me what to say. So I was kind of like in that situation of trying to pacify him with saying what he wanted said, and trying at the same time to answer the 000 questions, which I've got to say was really challenging. But anyway, that was that, and the end of that.
Master of the understatement, Louisa. It's challenging. I can see that challenging, because I can imagine the 000 would be firing questions at you. And did he say what the purpose of the terrorist act was? Who he was?
Well, first of all, he never referred to it as a terrorist act himself. And as an aside, one of the other girls referred to him as that, a terrorist, and he said, he got a little bit indignant. He said, "Do you think I'm a terrorist?" And she said, "Well, what else can I call you?" And at that point he said, "You can call me brother ISIS."
Okay, so linking to ISIS,
yes,
as we know from
that's right.
Yeah.
So we then started to call him brother. So prior to that, I'd been referring to him as sir, because, men like that like to be deferred to.
Yep.
And so, but once he said, call me brother, which was the most ironic joke in some ways. But, there we were. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if he had a gun, I'd call him whatever he wanted me to call him. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long had you been there before you're making contact with Triple O?
From my memory, which is vague
Yeah.
about the time, I think probably we're in that situation about half an hour. But of course, Triple O had already been called because Tori had made that call. But so probably would have been about half an hour.
Yep.
I think.
And he had you all hand your phones in? Was that
He did, yeah. So one of the first things he did was get everyone handing in their phones and their ID. So that's what happened. We all pulled out our ID and put it on the table and our phones, and they were just left there. And of course, we're all spread across the cafe, but then we were pulled in. And so for most of us, our phones were left on various tables that we had been sitting at. So throughout the day, of course, as people's friends and family become aware that it must be them in the cafe, then the phones were ringing.
Phones were ringing. That was he always had the firearm and always making a point of the fact that he's got control of this situation because he's got the firearm?
That's right, absolutely. And of course, he had told us that he had a bomb in his backpack.
Yeah.
And then he said, "I've got 2 bombs in my backpack." And at that point, I remember thinking, why have you got 2 bombs? Yeah, you haven't got a bomb. But, what do I know? I'm not going to argue with a man like that.
Yeah.
And so just went, okay, he's got a bomb. So he has a bomb in his backpack and he's got the gun.
And the fact that he's made reference to a bomb, whether you can surmise, well, maybe it's not a bomb, you just don't know.
That's right.
And
What do I know?
Yeah,
How does a bomb look?
Yeah. Again, we're fed by a lot that we've seen in the media and in fiction as well. That the bomb goes off in the backpack when they push the button. That type of thing. So that would have added to the whole scenario.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's just that layer upon layer of pressure.
Yeah.
And it's the day's winding on, and you're sort of realizing that he's not going to kill anyone in a hurry, but that's a threat that's always there. Like. Certainly when the first hostages escaped. But, that is always there.
Did you think, and I'm trying to get a sense because only you know it, were you hoping that at some point in time police were going to come crashing through the door from the early stages?
Gary, absolutely. From the get-go, absolutely. I believed that the police would rescue us because, that's what police do, right? They rescue us. And I just assumed that they were coming eventually, as he obviously was, thinking that, that the police were coming. And, it was a surprise to discover that that wasn't the plan. But so all through the day, there was a certain undercurrent amongst us. Like we weren't speaking to each other, and we're all random strangers, as I've said. But, you could tell there was a vibe around us, and that was simply to keep him entertained and busy and give him what he wanted as far as we possibly could, to keep him focused on other things, which was trying to get media attention while we all waited for the police to come. Now, I've never spoken to my fellow hostages about this, but I assume that they all thought the same.
I suppose in a group situation like that, without the communication, the body language and the whole tone of the thing, you would have been, okay, let's just keep him happy because sooner or later the police are going to arrive and this will be over.
And we could see them, of course, as the day went on. We could see the TOU guys outside. Obviously, they weren't directly in front of the doors or anything like that, but we could see their reflection in the marble from the Reserve Bank. And, and I know this is going to sound the strangest, weird thing, but you could feel them.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we did through all that brick and marble and everything, but you could feel. Yeah, mystery.
No, well, yeah, I think in a situation like that, your senses are heightened, every sense. And so, I don't think it's unusual to, experience things that you can't really explain in that situation. The efforts to contact the Prime Minister and when you said the young staff member stepped up and said he'd negotiate, how was that going? What was Monis doing? when all this was going on? Was he constantly talking to you and keeping control, or was he silent?
No, he's constantly talking and definitely keeping control.
Yeah.
And he was, as the like the younger ones stepped up because they were more fluid with social media and then all that kind of stuff. And then he told us to put it on our social media, and which of course would have just been terrifying for people's family and friends. So of course, Mum and I didn't have my phone, so I didn't do any of that. Mum, of course, didn't have that kind of thing. So anyway, everyone was busy with that, doing social media, and also trying to get press attention. So,
Sorry, could I just... So when you say everyone was busy on social media, so you had your phones there and he was encouraging people
he did certain people, not everyone all at the same time or anything like that, but he was saying, like, put it on social media. Then how do we get it up onto YouTube? Well, Jared Morton Hoffman and some of the others knew just how to do that. And then, of course, he had us make this video telling people what was going on and what he wanted. And, of course, that particular video, I participated in that. And the thing was, he said, say what you like, but say this. So, sure. So, of course, wanting to placate him, and by placating him, keeping him passive, or as passive as a man with a gun can be, hoping that, just give us that bit more time till the police come. So, yes, it was like that. The whole day was about trying to get media attention. And that was exhausting, but we're all participating in that in one way or another. Not so much my mother and I, but, watching, what the other kids were doing, etc.
But I fully understand placating the person in there, and you've probably heard the terminology Stockholm syndrome. With I think it was from a 1974 hostage situation where people are doing things to appease a person that's got control of the situation. So I understand that. Delivering the messages. Like, again, this is, and I'm tapping into, because most people don't have this life experience being caught up in something like this, but we've seen it on TV and you see these horrible situations where hostages are staring at the camera going, please, the person is being good to us, blah, 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 whatever demands. What was that like?
It was peculiar to have to do that. So I remember that when I did mine, I just... ad-libbed it, of course, whilst he's in the side telling me what to say, and trying to say it quickly, to get the whole thing over and done with. But, he, the interesting thing, as you pointed out earlier, the whole Stockholm Syndrome situation, I can say with confidence in my own heart that we were not in that Stockholm situation, particularly because nobody had given over to him or yielded to him. Everyone was participating to hold out long enough for the police to come. So we hadn't gone over to his side. We're just doing whatever it takes.
Hadn't been broken.
No, that's right. Yeah. And there was certainly no love for the man, but just whatever he wanted for now.
Did you, looking at the people in there, and at the time you were walking with the aid of a walking stick?
That's correct.
Other people in there, did you think there was opportunities for other people to take action? Do you think that was going through people's minds when he's, like with 18 of you in there and one person with a gun? He can't keep an eye on everyone, depending on where he's got you corralled or positioned. Were you concerned someone was going to try something to resolve the situation? Not concerned. Did you think that was a possibility?
Well, of course, I did think that could be a possibility. I didn't know how that could be. But, really, I now know that some of the younger guys had taken knives from the kitchen when they were pulled out of the kitchen right at the beginning. And seriously, I cannot think of how they could have attacked him without, first of all, this bomb going off, or the gun going off, or, them being killed, or somebody else. So, just as an aside, I'll tell you this little story. So at one point, my mother, who was, blood was boiling, she stands up and she hands on her hips and she says, I want to go to the bathroom and my daughter needs some medication. Oh, Mum. Anyway, so he says, you go to the toilet, and he used to send us with 1 or 2 Lindt workers, or each of us went with the Lindt workers. It was either Jared or young Fiona Ma. Anyway, so Mum, she'd done that, and off she goes, and she goes down to the bathroom with Fiona and Jared for whatever reason. He sent the 2 of them. So she's down in the toilet, and so Jared then tells me this story when I was in hospital, actually. And he says, your mother. I go, yeah, my mother. He said, we took her down to the toilet, and she says, right, you fellas. I can just hear her saying it. Right, you fellas, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go upstairs, because the toilets were down 3 stairs. Up 3 stairs. I'm going to go up the stairs, and I'm going to go and spit in his face, and all of you fellas are going to run out. And when Jared told me that, I just I'm in my hospital bed there, and he's visiting, and I'm like, oh, I had that cold sort of shiver go over me, because I thought, that was exactly what I was afraid of. And he says, we're laughing, at the same time, Jared and I, at the insanity of it. And she says, this is it. Like, I've made up my mind. And he says, but Robyn, he could kill you. And she goes, that's okay. I've had a good life. I'm not worried. He kills me. Doesn't matter. You fellas get out. You're only young, blah, blah, blah. And then he says to her, but he could kill somebody else.
Yeah.
And she had no answer for that, of course. So that put her back in a box. But I just sort of think about, the wisdom and the quick-wittedness of that young man to come up against my mother, who I absolutely have no doubt would have walked up and spat in his face.
Yeah.
And just I think, my goodness, Jared,
It says a lot. Wisdom above the years, and we look at kids or 19-year-old or whatever age he was, and think, well, you don't really know what life is about, but they step up in situations like that, and it's an extreme situation. Like I could imagine people just panicking. I'm surprised. People didn't just break down and cry uncontrollably.
Yeah, they did.
Did they? And that, looking at all the other hostages, just and matter for yourself whether you identify the hostages, but just the type of different reactions that people had in that situation. Because as you pointed out, collectively, you've all been brought there together. You don't know each other outside the staff members, and you've put in this extraordinary situation. So did you see things that inspired you with the other hostages? You've just talked about what Jared did, and other things that surprised you, how people react?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that it would have been appropriate and understandable if absolutely everybody was on the floor crying their eyes out. It was terrifying, quite frankly. And I mean, that nobody vomited with the fear is still a surprise to me. Like some of the younger girls were quite like that, and totally understandable. But of course, those younger girls were on the floor, fraying illness, not coping, but that they managed to find a way to sneak out of the cafe.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, you don't know. People have their own way of surviving.
Yeah. How far into the siege was it when the first 3 managed to escape?
Yeah, I think that it was probably mid-afternoon.
Okay, so we're looking at 4 or 5 hours type situation.
And those guys, I am so glad they escaped.
Yeah.
So glad, because I think that I do not know the mind of a terrorist, right? But I think that Monis and the way he was treating some of the men, he was dehumanizing them, and he was referring to them as white shirt, for example. He referred to dear Tori as manager, and whereas the women, he tended to use our names. He referred to my mother as Louisa's mother, but but then she was irritating him, so the first lot of when the first lot of hostages escaped, obviously the terrorist and us, we thought that the police were coming.
Right.
We just assumed that was what was happening in the moment. So there was a big noise, and then 3 of them ran out, and then we're all on our feet, like, it's kind of screaming, etc. And of course, he grabbed me because I just happened to be the first person in his eye of sight. So he grabbed me, he's got me by the back of my dress, and he's got the gun. And I'm thinking, great, the police are going to come, they're going to try and shoot him, and they'll shoot me, and I'm definitely going to die, so it was like that. And of course, what had happened was that they had all escaped. And it was only that once again, Jared Morton Hoffman was quick enough to shout at him, the police aren't coming, they've escaped. So it was only in that moment that it suddenly took down the temperature, in the room, and it was later, he actually said to the group, he said, you all should thank Jared that he was quick enough to tell me that the police weren't coming, that they had escaped, because I would have killed that woman being me, of course.
Yeah, well, that puts you. You're smiling. I said you're a nice lady at the start of the podcast, but and I do understand it, and we'll explain it again, because I think people that have seen horrific situations, been in horrific situations, and police experience that quite often. A lot of people don't understand how you laugh, but it is a coping mechanism, isn't it? You've got to, otherwise you get dragged into this dark hole that's very hard to get out. But I'm going to take you in that hole right now.
Yeah.
That must have been like the chaos of, because they ran out the door, they saw an opportunity, ran out the door. You're all on your feet. He's panicking, heightened state of alert, and he's grabbed you, and he's got a gun in his hand. At the best scenario, the police are coming in the door and they're going to try and take him out, but you're virtually his human shield, or he's going to react violently and shoot you, as he said he was considering. What was going through your mind at that point in time? Is that a point in time when you think, this is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Not wanting to be glib about this, but I have an easy relationship with death.
Yeah.
And that has to do with my faith. And so, once I kind of realised right from the beginning, really, that this could be it, I started to understand something about myself. So this is a little side story.
Yeah,
but,
please.
And that was that we all understand the concept of body, mind and spirit. We talk about it and, there's a lot of money made out of it, all that kind of thing. But during the siege, I actually experienced it in real time within myself, in that, and it wasn't just an idea or a concept or a philosophy, it was, I could feel it physically within myself. So in my head, my logical head, I could not see a way forward. I really thought that we and I would die. In my heart, I was, oh my God, what's going to happen? Panic. But in my gut, in the depth of my very being, I had an overwhelming sense of calm. And, people who are familiar would understand, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding keeps you anchored in that sureness that whether I lived or I died that day, ultimately, for me, it didn't matter. I go on. So, that was core to my being and my thinking. So, but experiencing it in real time, and I remember thinking, gosh, I've only just come to understand this and I'm going to die, and so, that gave me a certain amount of psycho-emotional freedom. Yeah. In that moment, this is it. That's exactly what it was like. I definitely thought I was going to die then.
Well, like full credit to you to be able to process all that, come to terms with it, and it must be comforting to have that feeling and be able to find your peace at that moment.
Yeah, it enables you to see clearly.
Yeah. Okay, they've run out. Police haven't come in. You haven't been shot. What's the tension in the room like after that?
Well, we had a moment of being like, oh my God, and then everyone sits down, calms down. So we go back to trying to get him media attention. And, the day's progressing and we're not getting very far with that media attention. And of course, there's listening on phones and things like that. He didn't have a phone that day. or if he did, it was in his backpack and
Yep.
etc. But so he's getting other people to use their phones, and at one point we had to recharge phones because everyone's phone's running out. So anyway, there was all of that kind of thing. Yeah, that's where we are. We are waiting.
Right, just sitting there waiting. With the and I've experienced in policing times where the adrenaline hits you, a life-threatening situation, and then the calm down and all that. People react differently, and you said it's amazing people weren't throwing up and that, because I've seen people where the adrenaline's just taken through the roof,
Yes.
and then it's come down. Were you guys experiencing that, or where were you? You've explained where you were getting your comfort from. What about the other people? Were you relying on the other people in the same situation? Were you drawing strength from others?
I'd say, definitely so. Just watching everybody else, and some very smart people in that room actually. And the collective sense of calm and control and waiting. I'd say that was strong. The strongest vibe in the room, really.
And my assessment of the situation, if you lot being the hostages creating chaos, he potentially could have reacted very irrationally, and it could have been a lot worse.
Yes, that's right, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, like I said earlier, he didn't like my mother's tone, and at one stage he told me, he said, "Louisa, keep your mother quiet."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you're not serious, are you? Keep my mother quiet.
I've been trying to do that for years. It's impossible.
So, and I had that little moment. It's the only time I actually spoke to her, and I turned to her and I said, "Mum, you're an old lady. You have to be quiet and just not say anything." And, the whole time I'm getting the daggers from her saying, like, wait till we get home. You can't talk to me like that. So anyway, but yes, so he was definitely controlling. Yeah.
Right. And you said his attitude towards the men were a little bit different. Was that he was struggling for his insecurities with power, or what was that about?
Well, I guess he saw them as the most threatening,
Right, okay.
that they could physically overpower him.
Yep.
He softened, like, for example, when the younger ones were helping him with the media and social media and the technology and all that kind of stuff with the phones, he softened a little bit around them, the younger guys, and started to refer to them by name.
Right.
But certainly he had that keeping the men away. And fortunately, those three men escaped initially, so that was really good.
Did you, like, you've been in there now 6-8 hours, were you trying to process the type of person? Were you trying to get a sense of who he was, like what triggers him, what doesn't trigger him? What was
Definitely.
the sense of, where did you think he was coming from? Did you think mental health, or did you think, a terrorist in the truest sense with his ideology?
Yeah.
What was it?
This is always the question, isn't it? There's just so much reflection around this. Was it really a terrorist event? And I'm thinking, yeah, it really was a terrorist event. But I only thought that after I went to the inquest.
Yeah.
In the moment, I thought the few things about him was that he was very articulate. He had an accent, of course.
Yep.
So he was making a really big effort to be clear in his instructions. So there was that. So that's why I say he was articulate, in that he made such a point of being very careful about that. So he's aware of that in himself. He was, well, actually, my mother, she noticed that he was very clean and neat and tidy, which really mattered to her.
I love you, Mum.
No,
You've got
right.
to love the take
exactly.
on life.
Like, she was even noticing that he had that. You remember how we used to do it in the 80s? We'd sew this iron the seam into our jeans, and she commented that he had that. So someone had ironed those trousers for him, Louisa. I'm thinking somebody did, Mum. Anyway, so
sorry, we laugh at it, but
Yeah.
the wisdom of that is
Yes.
quite telling. Like, I wouldn't
yeah.
have been thinking about that. So someone's taken the trouble to, because that does tell you a little about
Yeah.
the person. And the fact that your mum, that we're sitting here laughing, but she was the one that something
Yeah.
doesn't look right about that
Yes,
person. So
exactly.
maybe we should listen to our elders.
Yeah, well, see, she noticed the detail.
Yeah.
She noticed. She knew how many people were in the cafe. I never counted, but she knew, and she had an internal clock. She knew what time it was, even if she couldn't see the time. So she could tell you what time it was when blah blah happened. But yes, that's right. That's the thing about her. But anyway, on the day. I was just trying to keep her quiet. But, yes.
Okay, so the next significant event that occurred in the siege was that further hostages escaped. Now, tell us about that, because that was the two girls.
That's right.
That they were hiding or out of sight from him under a table. But I think, and clarify it if I'm wrong, I think after the first group of hostages escaped, the three that got out first, he said if anyone else escapes, people are going to be killed.
Exactly.
Talk us through that.
That's exactly what he said. He made it very clear that if anyone else tried to escape, that he would kill someone in retribution. Okay, then we all knew that. So these two young girls, they were Lindt workers. It was very coincidence, but, all the young Lindt workers were young women, petite young women. They had the Lindt uniform on, which is black with a long apron, and they all had long dark hair. So it just happened to be the way it was on the day, right? And so who they were, they all kind of, were together. But he told us that, someone was going to get killed. So then we're all sitting there, busy trying to get him this media attention, and then all of a sudden, like that, something happened. What happened? Now, I actually didn't see them escape, but I could tell the vibe and something happened. There was a feeling in the air. Something had happened, but what was that something? So anyway, we're all standing there. The others are going, I don't know. What do you mean? Something? What? And he was going, cops, was it cops around? We can't see the cops, blah, blah, blah. So everyone's trying to divert his attention. I didn't even realise I'd escaped because, Lindt had this giant Christmas teddy bear, cardboard cutout, and they had managed to somehow crawl. They had been on the floor. I'm sick, I'm dying, I'm terrified. And they managed to crawl around behind the teddy bear and then sneak out the side door, which I quite, in retrospect, I think, my goodness, you girls, how did you do that? But they managed it, which was really great. So there was 2 less hostages after the 3, and then those 2. So the thing is, of course, what that created within the media were rightly reporting all day that 3 people had escaped, the 2 people, so they're referring to 5 people had escaped. And so what happened every hour on the hour when that was being reported from outside, coming in, we're listening on the phones, we'd have to say to him, oh, that's so wrong, that's not true, you know what the media are, they're lying, that's not what happened, there's only 3 escaped. So we had to try and dumb down the fact that 2 extra had escaped.
Okay, just so I understand it there, that the 2 that when they escaped, he didn't realise they escaped. There was a change of the atmosphere or the tension in the room, and then the media are reporting 3 have escaped, now 5 have escaped. Mm-hmm. And you lot had the sense of mind to convince him that it's just just the media stuff.
Fortunately for us, the media were reporting the 5, not 3 escaped and then 2 escaped. They didn't report it like that we heard. Yeah. So we were able to convince him that you can't trust the media. They're lying. They're making that up. Feed into that conspiracy theory thing that's going on in his head. But he absolutely, it was really touch and go, because if he had done as my mother had done, had counted how many people there were in there, but he hadn't, so he didn't realise that those 2 girls had got out.
And if he saw those 2 girls get out, it's hypothetical now, he didn't, but I think you guys would have been at risk, or someone would have definitely been
because he would have had to have killed one of us, because that's what he'd said he'd done. Yeah. So, exactly, he would have had to follow through.
What was your feeling there? And it's a very complex situation. What was your feeling there when the girls did escape, given the threat that he made? Were you angry, happy? Can you talk about it? What your feelings
I have
were?
to, like I said, I didn't see them get out. Everyone was in a slightly different position, and that's something I did not see. And so it took me a little while to actually think, hang on a minute, she's not here. So, but so it took me a little while to work out that literally something, they'd gone, those girls. And in the moment I was like, gosh, how brave are they, to
Yeah.
do that? And grateful that they'd gotten out. But also at the same time, I was well aware that if he clicked, if he suddenly had a moment where he went, hang on a minute, then we would have been in trouble. So, yeah.
Okay. It's just a horrible, horrible situation,
Yeah.
isn't it? All those mixed emotions. What? How long have you been there when the two girls escaped, roughly?
I think it's late afternoon by then.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
How were you coping physically and mentally at that point in time? Because that's the heart's the stress is right up there.
Definitely, all those kind of moments, and it was definitely like that. It wasn't static. It was constantly moving, and constantly going up and down. And so the for me physically, fortunately, thank goodness, he let us have toilet breaks.
Yeah.
And at differing stages, he gave us water. He was not drinking, very late in the evening, he told the cafe workers to go and get like tea and some food for people. And, but, at the point where my mother had stood up and said, I want to go to the bathroom and my daughter needs her medication.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing about this man, you see. And that is that he, when my mother said that, first thing he did was call me over to sit right next to him, which I was like, oh no, if the cops come right now, I'm right next to him.
Yeah.
So anyway, sit right next to him, and he says, why do you need medication? So then I explained to him about MS, and he wanted to know everything about MS and how I got it and what it does and how I feel and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he says, where is your medication? I said, it's in my handbag. So he's get Louisa's handbag. So they bring my red handbag over to me, and he says, you can get your medication. So I pulled out my rather large Tupperware water bottle and I put it on the table, and then I went down into my handbag to get my medication, which actually was not for MS, it was just painkillers. And I took 2 of those tablets.
Yeah.
And then so I did all of that, and that was great. And then a little bit later on, he puts his hand on my water bottle and he says, Louisa, anytime you need your medication, you don't have to ask me. It's okay. You just help yourself to your medication. And I'm thinking to myself, he thinks my medication is in this water bottle. And I didn't have the heart. I just said, thank you, brother, very much. And I thought, oh my God. But, so here's this man, right? He's holding us hostage. He has threatened my very life. He's used me, like you said, as a human shield. But then there he is, so concerned that I have an illness that needs medication. Yeah. So what is this duplicitous, double-minded thinking in this man? It's the same kind of man that tells his mother, his wife rather, that he loves her and then assaults her, bashes her to a pulp. It's that same kind of thinking. What is that? Violence.
So I suppose seeing someone like that and appreciating that, there are ways of placating and manipulating the situation from your point of view with him. Yeah. Okay, so you're a smart lady. So you're sitting there, you're processing all this and thinking, okay, this is the way that we've got to deal with this person.
Yeah.
We'll have a break in a sec, but the iconic image of that day was the hostages up with the up against the windows. Talk us through that, how that played out.
Well, that started very quickly in the day. He was having people holding up the flag and standing at the windows with their hands up against the windows, which must have been so disturbing for everybody to see that. And he was rotating people. I mean, once again, this was a thought. He didn't leave people up there like that the whole day. He said, you get up, you sit down, and he was rotating. And at one point he said to me, your turn, stand up at the window. And I said to him, but I might fall, because I had my walking stick. And I showed him my walking stick. Oh, he says, and he says, put the walking stick down. So I put the walking stick on the floor, and then he kicks the walking stick out of my reach. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay, you don't have to stand at the window. And then a little bit later, after he'd finished giving instructions in that section, he looked at me and he made this sort of like sympathetic face. He went, sorry about the walking stick, but you understand, I would understand that he couldn't let me have my walking stick. And I went, yes, I understand. But it just, how weird is that, right?
It's terribly weird.
Yeah. So, like on one hand, he's this, hideous, ferocious terrorist. And the other hand, he's well-mannered and thoughtful. That double-mindedness, But
Yeah.
see, that's just how simple it is. Like, and you imagine living with someone like that. 1 minute violent and next minute sweet.
Yeah. Okay, I need a break. I think you've taken me, and as I said, I worked on the case. I did the crime scene, but you've taken me in there in a way that I haven't really appreciated, and the way you're articulating it, I thank you so much. We're going to leave you in there now, and I apologise for that. But when we come back, we'll pick up from where we left off. But yeah, thank you for sharing these experiences, Louisa. It's just that it's taken everyone into that situation you found yourself in.